Good afternoon, everyone. A Wednesday edition of On Cue coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the SR 1029 FM The Game studios. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We got about an hour or so to play with a rapid fire Wednesday edition. Hope everyone had a wonderful Sports Tuesday. You are enjoying your Wednesday, the 21st of January 2026. As always, you can get social with me. We are on various platforms: YouTube, Kicks, Rumble, IG, LinkedIn, also on SR 1029 FM, The Game, part of the Coastal Sports Digital Network. The audio is live as we speak. So just go to the website and download the app or download the AUDACY app and search Coastal Sports Digital Network. And as always, get social with me. Very, very easy to do. At Rich Q on X and IG. As I mentioned, we got hoops later on this Wednesday. So we wanted to get in a Woosah Wednesday, which basically entails this. How long will it take the listening audience to get under my skin? We've had record-breaking time over the last several months, but NFL heavy. We'll mix in a little NBA, a little hot stove baseball as well, a little potpourri on this Wednesday. And I wanted to start with, there's, I guess, a couple prevailing thoughts when it comes to the NFL and some of these positions that have become open as far as the offensive coordinators. And I'll get into the mess that is the Buffalo Bills, because that was one of the most bizarre press conferences I've ever seen in my life, with the GM and the owner basically placating one another and throwing Sean McDermott pretty much not only under the bus, but backing over him several times. It was really pathetic, to be quite honest. If you watched it and you were a Bills fan, you had to feel absolutely embarrassed. But I do want to start with the Philadelphia Eagles, because I find it just absolutely fascinating that yet this team is without an offensive coordinator. And the reason I bring it back is because no Brian Daboll, no Mike McDaniel, right? So by all accounts, you had a couple former head coaches, McDaniel, Brian Daboll. They were pretty much at the top of the Philadelphia Eagles wish list when we're talking about filling in the void at the offensive coordinator position. And I think what's happening now, to compound the issues or make matters worse, there has to be a disconnect, an issue within this organization, or maybe it's a structural issue, because you see Jeffrey Lurie basically is kind of putting a lot of these coordinators over the last several years on a very short leash. Now, Mike McDaniel, who is a former head coach with the Miami Dolphins, never took a formal interview with the Philadelphia Eagles, spoke to them earlier this week, and then he decided to go to the Chargers. I mean, that was his preferred destination, right? Absent a head coaching offer, which I believe he wasn't going to get. So now he's going to work under Harbaugh with Justin Herbert. Then you have Brian Daboll, and you connect the dots. Sean McDermott gets fired. Brian Daboll is goo goo gaga for Josh Allen in Buffalo. Would love to go back there, where he turned Josh Allen into a young gunslinger, into a perennial all-pro MVP caliber quarterback, along with McDermott. Daboll, who was with the Giants and that imploded, strong relationship obviously with Nick Sirianni, interviewed with Philly on Tuesday, and then he basically decided, well, I either want the top spot in Buffalo, or I'm going to go grab an offensive coordinator gig with a defensive-minded head coach, Robert Saleh, in Tennessee. Now, you can kind of do what you would like with that. Is that basically suggesting that I'd rather work in Tennessee with a young quarterback and maybe a franchise that is trying to turn things around, aside from the Philadelphia Eagles, who are a year removed from winning the Super Bowl? They are in a very precarious situation right now. Spot the Philadelphia Eagles are in. Because it's pretty clear, it's pretty evident that they're going to try to move on from A.J. Brown. Talented wide receiver, but volatile wide receiver, diva-like wide receiver. And, you're running out of options here. Now, if we throw in McDermott, think about it. He's fired, and maybe the Eagles are going to be none the wiser knowing that, well, wait a second, we can bring in Sean McDermott as an offensive coordinator. And I've got a couple of thoughts and opinions right now. So Brian Daboll, if you think about it, McDaniel spurns the Eagles and he goes to the Chargers to become an offensive coordinator. Brian Daboll reportedly informed Philadelphia he's not interested in the offensive coordinator vacancy either, according to Diana Rossini, that everyone believes is an Eagles hater, but she might have just hit the nail right on the head here. So they get rid of Kevin Patullo a day after they lose to the 49ers, or 2 days after, January 13th. Eagles have been targeting Brian Daboll, who was with the Giants, as I mentioned, and of course the former offensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills. He's got familiarity with the NFC East and obviously quarterback Jalen Hurts. We already know that. He passes on this job. He passes on this gig. We know his track record, 11-33 in 3 seasons. And this is after he took the Giants to the playoffs a couple years ago. No McDaniel. You've got other names out there that are floating around. So I find it interesting that these guys are kind of spurning the Philadelphia Eagles when we talk about all the weapons that the Philadelphia Eagles have in Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Smith, Goddard, Saquon Barkley, the offensive line. It's starting to almost like resemble this as much as we sit there and say they're the gold standard. Well, let's be honest. They're kind of a shit show right now, are they not? There really is. There's kind of this, disconnect from top to bottom, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that Jeffrey Lurie is very tight with Jalen Hurts. Nick Sirianni never ever criticizes Jalen Hurts. He doesn't do that, and Howie Roseman hasn't really criticized Jalen Hurts as well. So you got a quarterback that's under fire. You got a quarterback that's under duress in Jalen Hurts, and everyone believes last year was a fluke. You can't get it done again. He's not that guy going forward. Okay, fine. We can kind of put that to the back burner for a moment. But when push comes to shove, there has to be a reason that you look at all these all-pro, position players. They've got depth all over the place. Why are coordinators not interested in this job? So the Titans hire Robert Saleh, who was with the San Francisco 49ers, defensive coordinator, flamed out with the Jets, went back to the 49ers and turned that walking mash unit into a top 10 defense. So now, think about it. It's like when defensive coordinator Vic Fangio pretty much performs well for an offensive-minded head coach like Nick Sirianni. So Robert Saleh's, right now, Tennessee's head coach, he's got to hire that offensive coordinator to basically have full autonomy on that side of the ball. Plus, we know that the Titans obviously have a number 1 draft pick in Cam Ward, showed a little promise his rookie season, 3,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. To me, that doesn't help the Eagles at all. I mean, the offensive coordinator position, it is a glaring opening at the moment, and it doesn't look like it's going to be filled anytime soon. I don't know if Sean McDermott wants to be a coordinator. I think Sean McDermott wants to follow the steps of Harbaugh. I got fired. I got pushed out. I want a shot right now to be a head coach. And he's earned that. The Stefanskis and the Dayballs and McDaniels, they don't have the body of work that McDermott and or a Harbaugh have had. They just don't, especially Harbaugh, winning a championship, winning a Super Bowl. But man, I'll tell you, it kind of speaks to what's going on with this organization. It really does. You're telling me that this is not a desirable landing spot for an offensive coordinator? Now, by all accounts, it looks like it's not. Which is perplexing because everyone, the gold standard. Well, guess what? Brian Daboll doesn't want the Eagles offensive coordinator job. McDaniel doesn't want the Eagles offensive coordinator job. And here's the reality. The reality is when you have a head coach, okay, like Nick Sirianni, that is a cheerleader, that just runs up against the sidelines, that conducts no order, no accountability, basically is a clown, yet you won in spite of him. I don't know if guys want to be a part of that. I really don't. I really don't believe some guys want to be a part of that. You would sit there and say it is a desirable job, but maybe it's not as desirable as a lot of the members of the media are making it out to be. It's a bad look that Mike McDaniel, a top candidate, basically never came in for an interview. It's a bad look that Brian Daboll, who's got ties with Sirianni, has ties with Jalen Hurts, is not interested in the job. It is a bad look when you've got former players now coming out criticizing the quarterback, looking at the wide receiver, talking about an aging team. It is a bad look when everyone believes that last year was an aberration because of Saquon Barkley, 2,000 yards, the offensive line, and Hurts actually performing in the playoffs, but what have you done for me lately? It's a bad look when you no-show at home against the 49ers, a team they should have beat by 17 points. It's a bad look when Nick Sirianni was reluctant to fire his guy, Kevin Patullo. You know for a fact they backed him in a corner after that loss and basically said, if you don't do it, we're going to do it. That is a bad look. So right now, this whole idea of the Philadelphia Eagles being the gold standard, that's a crock. They're a shit show right now. They are a shit show right now. It's obvious. It's clear as day. It's like they got a bunch of germs. Nobody wants to get close to them. Nobody wants to get sick. And I think these are problems that are starting to resonate with this team. And the big thing is with Daboll and McDaniel, they want full control of the offense. And the problem is Nick Sirianni's not going to submit. And I don't think the Eagles are going to give up or offer up that equity with full control. And then you got the A.J. Brown factor. He's a headache. He is a headache. So do you really think a McDaniel, and we know about the clash with Fangio, okay, fine, but a McDaniel and or a Brian Daboll or insert offensive coordinator wants to pressure of being the coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles and then basically having to answer from the jump? How do you figure on getting A.J. Brown the ball? Like, are you going to have to force feed? I don't want pressure to force feed a guy when I'm trying to run my offense. I don't. I really don't. Now, here's the other thing. What happens if the Eagles' hands are forced and they have to trade A.J. Brown? Does that weaken that offense? Does it lessen the offense? So you got the A.J. Brown factor, which comes with a lot of drama and nonsense. You also have the Jalen Hurts situation, which is like the elephant in the room. Is Jalen Hurts playing a role in, coach's decision-making, right? Think about this. The report is Jalen Hurts has been less inclined to run quarterback-designated plays during the 2025 season. And then what happens is we start to see his limitations there pointed out. So there now has to be that question, the $64,000 question, if you're an Eagles fan, if you're part of that Eagles brass and that franchise, the question is whether an offensive coordinator is willing to work with Jalen Hurts if he doesn't want to run the football. So the idea now is the reality, the rub is this. Maybe, just maybe, the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator position is not the sexiest job in all of sports. Maybe it's just a situation where, yeah, it could be, but I got to get rid of some pieces here. I have to addition by subtraction. I got to remove some doubt. And it starts with perhaps a diva wide receiver. It starts with perhaps, the question mark surrounding the franchise quarterback, Jalen Hurts, an aging offensive line, getting Smith involved. What are you going to get from Saquon Barkley? What are you getting from Devontae Smith? What are you getting from Goddard? I mean, to me, I look at this job right now and I look at this franchise and I believe they're in trouble. I believe they are in trouble. I really do. Because the handwriting's on the wall. It's on the wall. And is it also possible Nick Sirianni doesn't want a guy to come in that has head coaching experience because he realizes if they get off to a slow start, he's going to be under the microscope. The pressure is going to be on him back against the wall. Why is this not working? And oh, by the way, he's got to realize if I get fired, they're going to slip one of these guys right in here. That's one of the other reasons they're bringing him in, head coaching experience. So I think right now, listen, they got to start targeting, and they got to start targeting big time. They really do. They really do. And if Sirianni is technically leading the search and Jeffrey Lurie obviously has the say or the sway, then he's going to have to be nosy and get involved here. He's going to have to. And the thing is, you failed, right? Sirianni, you talk about leading the search, right? And I think that's what fans are kind of hung up on because you're talking about he's got bad judgment, Brian Johnson, Kevin Patullo. Remember, Sirianni's also responsible for bringing in Shane Steichen, Kellen Moore, right? They became first-time head coaches. So we want to peel back a little bit, maybe not rush to judgment, but it's raw. Kevin Patullo, absolutely clueless. I mean, if you bring in someone with less experience, their offense might be worse next year. And the thing is now, Brian Daboll, again, would have full control of that Titans offense. That's what he wants. And they're not going to offer that up to Brian Daboll. They're not. They're not going to do it. They're just not. Plus, potentially, if he decides I'm not inclined, or I wanted the Buffalo Bills head coaching job, he's a candidate there. So that's more competition for the Eagles. If he doesn't go that route, if they're going to go in a different direction, if they don't bring him back, then he is going to land with the Tennessee Titans, and they're going to give him what he wants. That's control. Todd Monken is going with John Harbaugh. We know that he's going to go with John Harbaugh. He's going to go with John Harbaugh. So you've got so many issues right now with this franchise. You really do. I mean, it's in flux. It's not the gold standard. It's a shit show. It really is. Because what a lot of people deemed on paper would be a sexy offense to go run, you got question marks with the diva wide receiver, the offensive line. Saquon lost his step. Jalen Hurts, where is he at? Where is he at? And again, man, I'm telling you this. If you trade A.J. Brown, yeah, you do weaken that offense. Now, I would throw out a guy like Kubiak. Why haven't they interviewed a guy like Cliff Kingsbury yet? These guys might get, hired quickly, right? And I'm not going to sit there and call some of these guys coach killers. I'm not. And maybe they're not as high on him, but then what are you holding out for? Because the longer you hold out, it seems nobody wants to touch this offense. And I do believe it stems because the majority of it has to do with the head coach. I honestly believe that. I think this head coach is a friggin' clown. I really do. And I think offensive coordinators alike come in and they're like, what the hell is this guy really doing? Like, what is he really doing? Like, I can coach this team. And maybe Sirianni wants to have his say in certain things because he doesn't want a guy that he knows can replace him at any spur of the moment. Look, when guys get jettisoned, when players get released, coaches get fired, that's when they start to tap dance on graves, right? We're seeing it with the Buffalo Bills. Now there's a report Josh Allen stunned by the firing of Sean McDermott. You had the GM and you had the owner come out and basically throw McDermott under the bus, backtrack on the Coleman draft, appeasing each other. It was a disaster. You got Baker Mayfield now, tap dancing around Stefanski, calling him out, back and forth. Here we go. It's like there's these fresh wounds that are left. And some of these guys can't get over it. And some of these guys don't know how to react. I mean, what's going on in Buffalo is a disgrace. It's an utter disgrace. To listen to that presser, I've never in my life. It's clear as day that there is a disconnect between the players in the locker room and management. There is a disconnect. It's clear as day that Sean McDermott was beloved and meant so much to the franchise, and the GM and the owner basically are tap dancing on his grave as he's being forced out the door. The front office is a joke. It's a joke. It's an embarrassment. It really is. And it's not even about, listen, we've ad nauseum, I basically said about Josh Allen, great quarterback, comes up small. He's got to take a major hit. He's got to take a major hit. But you listen to the GM, Brandon Beane, talk about, no say over the Coleman move. And then you look at the video. He wanted Coleman talking about his his 40 time and all this, and then you have the owner come out and basically back in the GM, and then here's the coup de grace. Here's the coup de grace on this one. This is the narrative now that the certain NFL insiders that we all know, right? They want to push it. You listen to the rat ship coming out talking about they're so shocked and surprised that an owner makes a decision or a GM makes a decision to fire a head coach because of one bad loss. That's been going on since the dawn of time. The dawn of time. Okay. So when the owner comes out and basically says, when Pegula comes out and says that the decision to fire Sean McDermott was basically made pretty much in the locker room after the loss to Denver, that they felt they hit their proverbial playoff wall. That's a bad loss. Heads have to roll. That tells you that was an emotional fire. That was a knee-jerk reaction. 8-8 in the playoffs, I understand, but that tells me that's an owner that just does not lack the mental fortitude and understanding and the football acumen to understand it's fresh, take a step back. It was a tough loss. It was a bad loss. You can argue about the officiating, the catch, no catch, the pick, no pick. You can talk about Josh Allen having issues. You can talk about McDermott being a 500 head coach in the playoffs, but all these games that they won, all these times they went to the playoffs, won the division, 10, 11, 12 games, restoring order in Buffalo. We can have that conversation. But for NFL insiders, and you know who you are, to suggest or push this narrative, well, now in the NFL, I guess it's okay to fire a guy after a bad loss. Teams have been doing that since the dawn of day. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Al Davis was famous for doing it. You know how many owners fired coaches after horrible losses or bad playoff debacles? We've seen it. It's just Sean McDermott is a nice guy. He's a well-respected guy. He's a likable guy. And then it's magnified because you listen to the owner and the GM pile on the guy, and it just has a bad look all around. Now, he's not going to come out and say they didn't base that decision just on that result, but said it was a collection of events. Now, to me, again, that's BS. It's a knee-jerk reaction. You go back weeks ago when Sean McDermott basically pressed the owner and the GM about the roster and basically told them to their face, this is not a good enough roster, in so many words. He leaves that office, he leaves that meeting, and you got two guys are sitting there saying, this guy better friggin' win in January or he's out. Now, what happens? They lose a heartbreaker to Denver and they decide, this is what he said, backed us in a corner. Nobody likes being told what to do, especially when you are in the position of authority, and it backfired to McDermott and heads have to roll and his head was on the chopping block and away we go. That's pretty much, again, the fact that you're coming out saying we didn't fire McDermott on a bad officiating decision, right? You take it into the locker room and proverbial playoff wall. That's all nonsense and BS. They didn't like that McDermott called out the GM. That's all that was. Let's just call it for what it is. Owner didn't like the fact that McDermott is calling out the GM, the owner's hire. That's all. That's all that is. I don't need you to tell me that my GM's not doing his job or you're questioning our decision making or our roster building. Well, guess what? You go in the video, you bookmark it, and you go back. I mean, the stuff coming out between the GM and the owner talking about Coleman, is utterly ridiculous. The kid's still on the team. So you got the owner of the Bills saying the coaching staff pushed to draft wide receiver Keon Coleman. And that was never GM Brandon Beane's top choice in the decision. Quote, that was Brandon being a team player. He's taking heat over it. I'm here to tell you the true story. Again, never. And by the way, this kid's still on the roster. Can't catch cold. But I've never in my life have watched an owner go to bat for a GM and placate and basically make the head coach look worse out the door than what I was seeing with this press conference. I mean, it's like Josh Allen, after a while, was afraid to throw the friggin' football to this kid because you knew he was going to drop it. And oh, by the way, he had one reception for 10 yards. Yeah, sure, it turned out to be a touchdown, but still, you want to go through his whole friggin' season? He had one moment this season. That was against Baltimore to open up the season. Other than that, nothing. He's a bust. So at this point, you got to say, what's going on in Buffalo? What the hell's going on with the Philadelphia Eagles? Because right now, it's a toxic situation. There's a reason coordinators are steering clear of the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, these are two franchises that a lot of people thought were going to represent their conferences respectively. And now you're starting to see the cruel reality. Grass isn't always greener on the other side. And I'm telling you right now, I think a lot of this stems from Nick Sirianni. And if Nick Sirianni's smart, if he has any street smarts, he got to watch his back. Because if they bring in a former head coach to take over as OC and they bend and give him total autonomy, total control when it comes to how the offense is going to be ran, that's more of an indictment on Nick Sirianni. And there's a pregnant pause there because if they struggle to come out of the gate, especially on offense to start the season, and they're 1-4, 2-5, then you're going to see and you're going to hear the clamoring, the rumbles, the chants, fire Sirianni. And then if they do that, all they have to do is slide in that offensive coordinator. So you got the Hurts factor, you got A.J. Brown, you got the Sirianni, and here we go. They don't have an offensive coordinator. And that now becomes a story. It becomes an issue. It really does. Now, the other, I guess you can say story or situation to kind of watch is the frustration from Josh Allen. Because he was taken, just absolutely back by this, right? I mean, you never really know what the truth is, right? And apparently Josh Allen didn't know in advance. They spoke to Josh Allen after the fact. They didn't share the conversation. Josh Allen will have say on a new head coach. I mean, this is the new norm. You give the franchise quarterback a little equity, right? Now, how much say does he really have? Is he starting to grow frustrated, kind of like Joe Burrow in Cincinnati because they're not building around him? Like, that's the thing. If there's no weapons around you, you can't do it all by yourself, but yet the real great ones know how to elevate the talent around them, if that makes sense. And I think you've got a situation where the owner's saying one thing, he's protecting the GM. The GM looks like a rat. He's going to cover his ass. The quarterback is now being labeled as a choke artist. He can't win. And then you fire a guy that won a lot of games, but yet was 500 in the playoffs. Now, I don't have a problem with the Buffalo Bills firing Sean McDermott. I really don't. He was one of my coaches on the hot seat, and sometimes the message falls on deaf ears. But just like we've seen with other situations in the NFL and other franchises and organizations, there's enough blame to go around. There's enough blame to go around. All right, 3:35, cranking it up on a Woosah Wednesday edition of On Cue. We got about another 20 or so to play with. Little power hour on this Wednesday. Don't forget, get social with me at Rich Q on Q. You got some baseball stuff. You got the Butler injury in the NBA for the Warriors. You got my Knicks that are in trouble. I also saw with baseball and the Hall of Fame, I can't believe there are actually some people out there who do what I do for a living and actually would suggest that Andrew Jones is not a Hall of Famer. You want to debate Beltran? Fine. But to sit there and say Andrew Jones is not a Hall of Famer is utterly, blatantly just clownish. You have no idea what the hell you're talking about. All right, so we'll mix in a little bit, little bag, little potpourri. Get social with me at Rich Q on Q, TikTok, Rich Q on a mic. My man, New Headphones, who this? He 12 man, aka Heisman, aka Steeler Nation, aka Duval, other known as Vince, chimes in, always first. Thank you. Kingsbury should be getting more consideration, in my opinion. Players like him and his offenses produce. He was very young in Arizona, has worked with several people since. Shocked He's not that guy, or he hasn't gotten that chance. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. How much blame do you put on Kingsbury for what happened in Washington? Right now, here's another thing. If Now, just follow me. If Davis Webb becomes a head coach, then he's probably going to turn around and hire a guy like Kingsbury. I think Kingsbury is a smart offensive guy, and he's got, as you mentioned, head coaching experience. Now, his record doesn't blow you away. When he was with the Cardinals for a couple seasons, 28, 37, and 1. You got Davis Webb, a really young guy. I mean, I think he's only 30 years old, and he's worked with Sean Payton. Obviously, he had a little brief cup of coffee with the New York Giants as quarterback, but he is a hot name to watch. And the other thing is they're starting to become a little bit of a power struggle in Washington with Dan Quinn. So you promote David Blow to replace Kingsbury's offensive coordinator. And now Washington also confirmed that Darnell Stapleton is the new offensive line coach. He replaces Bobby Johnson. Shane Taub has become Washington's assistant line coach. So that makes 3 promotions, which is kind of perplexing given that most thought the need for a change was more important. Now, I don't know what's going to happen under Johnson. Again, is Quinn, is the play calling? We talk about the offensive coordinator position. Um, did Dan Quinn just did not like how the offense was ran, right? If he disliked the offense enough to get rid of Kiff Clinsbury and Bobby Johnson, but then liked the offense enough to promote these guys, I'm not going to suggest that that's a bad look or it's wrong. But to me, I feel that's kind of a goofy way to go about fixing your offense, right? So a lot of times when you talk about the structure within an organization, or we talk about the grooming, right? The working through the pipeline. To me, when you look at these organizations, the ones that know exactly what they're doing, the internal pipeline, the model of success or succession, I want you to move on to bigger and better things. That's kind of that's not what's happening, right? So they decide to move on from Kingsbury and Bobby Johnson. And I think now the Washington Brass is really putting a lot of faith in Dan Quinn's hands. So I think there might have been a little bit of a power struggle, a difference of opinion. And if a head coach is starting to or wanting to take over an offense and his ideas don't align with the current offensive coordinator, then more times than not, the offensive coordinator is going to be out the door. It's funny because Brian Daboll decides we'll give the keys to the offense to Mike Kafka, and then a couple weeks later, basically pull the play calling duties away from him. To me, that's bizarre. So I don't know the whole story in Washington. Johnson move, I think from what I've been told, well, not think, but from what I've been told is a little more confusing, right? Because the offensive line was stout. They were solid. I don't know if it's, again, the offensive scheme, we're going to shift a little bit in blocking concepts. And all of a sudden they got aligned with the new offensive coordinator. And here we go. But I think there are some issues brewing in Washington as well. And I'll tell you something else. If the Washington Commanders, who kind of burst onto the scene last year, going all the way to the NFC Championship, and then dealing with injuries and coming right back down to life this season and winning 5 games and never really getting off the mat. They had the bad losing streak. I think it was 7 in a row, 8 games in a row, and then they beat a bad Giants team. If they turn around and they struggle again next year with a healthy Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn's going to be out of a job. He's going to be out of a job. You can mark it down right now, January 21st. I mean, that's the way the NFL works. There's not a lot of patience. There's not, and there's always upheaval. All right, 346, quick timeout. We'll come back on the other side. Don't forget a Wednesday edition on Q. Rich Quinones here. We're powered by our good friends over at Three Brooks Bourbon. Get ready with tea. Fresh roasted coffee, 20% off your first purchase. Check out the show notes, BYP20. Quickie timeout. We'll come back on the other side. All right, welcome back, everyone. Wednesday edition of On Q, 3:47 Eastern Time. Don't forget, we're powered by our good friends over at SR 1029 FM, The Game, and of course, Coastal Sports Digital Network. What are we looking at? Some of you guys are questioning the Hall of Fame. We'll get into that a little more. Garafolo is reporting that Matt Nagy was interviewed for the for the offensive coordinator position for the Philadelphia Eagles. Listen, I think the problem right now is you're dealing with a quarterback that, let's be honest, did not have a very good season, regressed a little bit, reduced his running. Then you got to deal with less tush push effectiveness, right? Potentially losing AJ Brown, which now you're taking a huge chunk of that offense away. I think that causes not only some reservations, but I also think that it makes it more challenging for an offensive coordinator. And I'm telling you right now, if they move on from AJ Brown, you would think Howie is smart enough. We're going to find a replacement because that's what he does. But I also believe that the Jalen Hurts factor is starting to rear its ugly head. And look, they went to 2 Super Bowls with Jalen Hurts. They could have won 2 Super Bowls. They won one. He was the MVP. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes twice. And all of that is 100%. That's factual. You can never take that away. But again, this is the NFL. And when they needed that offense to click, when they needed their quarterback to run, when they needed their quarterback to make plays, when they needed their quarterback's legs to do some damage, more times than not this season, he was not able to do it or was reluctant to do it. And I think now you start to say, okay, what are the limitations? When you get former players coming out and they're questioning Jalen Hurts' football acumen, that's not good. It's not good. Dan chimes in Q. Excellent take on the Buffalo Bills. Think about this. We often give these types of people in position way too much power and credit. Yeah. Yep. Yep. The fact that the owner says the decision to move on at head coach was based on results in Denver, and he talked about the tears from Josh Allen. Does that mean Josh Allen shouldn't be held accountable? Does that also mean Josh Allen basically had a hand in Sean McDermott getting fired because he didn't play well? I mean, it's like a trickle down effect, is it not? JP chimes in. Q, if the Eagles are going to go after Nagy, that would be a big time pivot. Do you like that move? Listen, there's no Brian Dable. There's no Mike McDaniel. Nagy missed out on the Titans head coaching position. So he's there, right? And a lot of people thought he was kind of a favorite to land the job. He's a smart guy. And he's coming from the Andy Reid tree, is he not? Plus, he also played the quarterback position. But I believe they've got to figure it out sooner rather than later. Do they not? They have to. You don't want the perception that the franchise or the organization is untouchable because they're not willing to hold the quarterback accountable. Like, that's never a good thing. No one's saying throw him under the bus. But by all accounts, Jeffrey Lurie is so tight with Jalen Hurts. That's his guy. Right? Dan chimes in. I think you're the only one that talked about Josh Allen. Like, this national media, this glossing over, this juicing up his Allen, you say is ridiculous. Listen, Bills Mafia has to understand something. Yes, Josh Allen could be a great quarterback. He is a great quarterback. He can be your franchise quarterback. He can be a Hall of Fame quarterback. Your best player on the field against the Denver Broncos did not play like the best player on the field. Does that make sense? It's pretty cut and dry. You needed Josh Allen to be an all-world talent, and he wasn't. He wasn't. He didn't play well. And that happens sometimes. He just did not play well. He didn't. Q, that's an absolute meltdown. I watched that press conference with the Bills. It was cringeworthy. It was bad. It was bad. And here's the problem. The game is emotional. So after a game, after a loss, the emotion is raw, right? The emotion is raw. You lose a game like that in heartbreaking fashion. The quarterback, the franchise quarterback, so desperate to lead this team to the Super Bowl, plays poorly. The head coach, who's a fan favorite, the players adore him. They love him, held in high revere, right? In high regard, but still 8-8 in the playoffs. Can't get over the hump. Now, the moment after, guys are going to say things because they're not thinking clearly. Tears, frustration, why us? Always a bridesmaid, never a bride, playing the victim, the martyr, all that stuff. All that. But to now talk and have this type of emotion or lack of clarity or just, absolutely clownish comments and takes a couple days after where you had enough time to compose yourself and really think about how you're going to handle the presser, and knowing you just fired a head coach that is well respected around the league, and knowing that the owner comes out and says, in essence, without saying it, it's a knee-jerk reaction because you got a franchise quarterback crying because he played poorly. That gets the coach fired. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Josh Allen's crying because he realized the window's shut. Josh Allen was crying because he realized he didn't take his team to where they need to be. Josh Allen is crying because he realized the inevitable. The season's over. And oh, by the way, when are you going to have an opportunity to go through the AFC with no Lamar Jackson, no Patrick Mahomes, no Joe Burrow? That's why he was crying. Brutal loss. I didn't play well. You think Josh Allen is thinking in the moment, my tears are going to get this guy fired? No. But I don't need an owner or GM to make that decision based on a player's reaction after a loss. I don't want to play for that guy. I don't want to coach for that team. So you listen to this presser the other day, and it's unbelievable. And then you're talking about pushing, how, it's not on the GM. It was the coaches that wanted to push for Coleman. Now, the GM, that's your draft pick, period. Owner signs off on it. Coaches have a say in it, but ultimately the GM decides who we're drafting. That's just how it is in the NFL. Everyone can get on the same page and you can agree to disagree, but eventually, who's handing in the card? It's the GM. So somewhere along the line, it's just turned into a cluster. And Sean McDermott, who won a lot of games, who's a 500 coach in the playoffs, is not going to take an offensive coordinator job. He's not. He's just not. He wants a head coaching gig, just like Harbaugh. These guys meant so much to the franchise. They got pushed out the door. They got a chip on their shoulder. They don't want to waste a year being offensive coordinator. Absolutely not. I told you the two teams right now, either Baltimore or Cleveland. Stick them in there. Go ahead. Run it back. Keep them in the AFC. McDermott doesn't want to be an offensive coordinator. That firing was shocking to McDermott. And maybe to a man, Sean McDermott had an inkling. Maybe to a man, Sean McDermott realized, if I don't get it done, I can see them moving away. But in no uncertain terms, after that game, does Sean McDermott turn around and sees Josh Allen crying and think to himself, I'm getting fired because Josh Allen's crying? No. Come on. The owner is a clown. The owner is a clown. A couple executives are actually reporting right now that right now the Ravens are looking at defensive coordinator Jesse Minter. So now you're replacing the guy that was the guy after 18 years. That's a tough spot, but that's a good landing spot for him. If I'm the Browns, I pick up the phone and I'm looking at Sean McDermott because, again, restore order. Restore order. That's what I'm looking at. Tom D chimes in. Q, I can't believe you're actually calling the Eagles a shit show. How many Super Bowls have they been to? What about the level of success? This is just hater on a friggin' Wednesday. It's not. It's not. It's not hating. Explain to me why you have guys that are good, visible, viable options and candidates for offensive coordinator that can come in and do a much better job than Kevin Patullo decide we're not interested. What does that tell you? What does it tell you? Gold standard, my you know what? What does it tell you? You're telling me right now the Chargers is a sexier landing spot than the Philadelphia Eagles? Is that what you're telling me? The Titans are a sexier landing spot with a young quarterback and not nearly as many weapons as the Philadelphia Eagles? Like, is that what you're trying to explain to me? Because that's what I'm explaining to you, that I find it fascinating, hard to believe that's how some of these guys are viewing it. But by their actions and the fact that they're not interested or they're pulling their names out of consideration, what does that tell you, Tom? Seriously, what does that tell you? It tells you they don't want to deal with the shit show. They don't want to deal with Jalen Hurts. They don't want to deal with the cheerleader Nick Sirianni. They don't want to deal with the wide receiver that's a diva and A.J. Brown. They don't want to deal with the fact that the owner is going to cut them loose in a year or two if they don't get the job done. I mean, that's where we're at. Scott chimes in. McDermott from my Browns. If Lamar Jackson goes to the Raiders, which is a trade rumor, which we talked about over the last several weeks, then the Bengals and Joe Burrow window opens slightly as the Bills closes. Who knows what Burrow wants to do in Cincinnati? Joe Burrow is starting to give the Andrew Luck vibes, which is never a good thing, right? Problem is my Browns are looking at Grant Wendensky really hard. I want McDermott, but they will mess up as always. But remember, it's got to be a two-way street. It has to be a two-way street. I wanted Harbaugh. Harbaugh wanted the Giants. McDermott, if he's going to interview, if he's going to consider Cleveland, then you got to get a direction from ownership. And Barry, what direction are we going when it comes to the quarterback? That's the biggest thing. We can talk all we want till we're blue in the face regarding these offensive coordinators, but until you figure out who's going to be the quarterback, it's just it's just going to be a conversation we're having ad nauseum. Franchise chimes in. Q, thank you so much. I can't believe people are actually saying Jones is not a Hall of Famer. He's a walk-in. Oh, come on. Yes. Yeah. Look, and I understand kind of the arc of Andrew Jones's career, but you look at his raw talent, you look at the gold gloves, you look at the power. Yeah, he did a lot of it when he was younger in his career, but you can't tell me. You can't sit there with a straight face and tell me Andrew Jones is not a Hall of Famer. He's not. You can't tell me that he's not a Hall of Famer. He is a Hall of Famer. You guys are getting me a slip on a Wednesday. He is. He is. listen, he burst on the scene when he was 19. I remember I had a 2-homer game against my Yankees, game 1 of the 96 World Series. If you look at what he was able to do, and you look at the fact that more people started to appreciate him as he got older throughout the course of his career, the numbers speak for themselves. He was one of the best defensive outfielders of his generation, and he had power numbers to back it up. Look, Beltran was steady Eddie. 9-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove, 279, 20 years compiler, 2,800 hits, well over 400 home runs, I think 1,500 runs. He had close to 330 stolen bases. I think he's one of 5 players to reach 2,700 hits, 400 home runs, 400 home runs, all this stuff. The steals, Bonds, Mays, Rodriguez, 2 out of 3 in the Hall of Fame. A-Rod, we know, is a Hall of Famer, aside from the other nonsense. We know that. But Jones, the way he played the outfield position, the gold gloves, the defensive gems, and then adding the power, the pop. You're talking about Jones now. His defensive prowess, right? It was on display the first 10, 11, 12 years of his career. He's one of 6 outfielders to win 10 or more gold gloves. He gave you the power, 434. He played in 17 seasons. Okay, 255, 260 batting average. But you can't tell me otherwise. He is a Hall of Famer just based on the fact that, you talk about WAR, wins above replacement, how many games he might have saved, how many putouts. You think about what Smoltz was saying. Even if I'm behind on a hitter, and I think this kind of speaks. To Andrew Jones, okay? I think it really does. When you start to talk about a Hall of Fame pitcher who is telling you that he was confident in throwing certain pitches because he knew no matter what, if it was in the gap or it was, somewhere within the vicinity, my guy was running it down. He was running it down. That speaks to how well of a player Andrew Jones was, and how well of a defensive player and a gem Andrew Jones was. And they finally recognized it. The Hall of Fame voters, we'll have Gardner on later in the week or next week. They finally recognized it. He deserves his place in Cooperstown. I think Beltran a little more compiler. Just a little bit. IROB 565. Shit show Eagles are one of the best run organizations in the league. That's not debatable. Some of these offensive coordinators would rather go somewhere that's low pressure. Philly has high expectations. No one's saying they don't have high expectations, but here you go. So follow me for a second. You got Nick Sirianni, who brought in his guy, Kevin Patullo, who didn't even go outside the building. So we can talk about expectations all we want in the Philadelphia market. That's a fair comment. But think about this for a moment. With all these weapons, the running back, the tight ends, the wide receiver, the quarterback, the offensive line, why is a guy like McDaniel deciding I'd rather go to the Chargers? Why is a guy like Daboll deciding I'd rather go with a young team and the Titans and follow Robert Saleh? Like, you're telling me right now that the offensive coordinator position is not a sexy one in Philadelphia? If it is, then how come there's not a lot of suitors? And the problem is, this is what I believe, Rob, and you can disagree all you want. I believe a lot of it has to do with Nick Sirianni. I also believe it's the inability of the brass to call into question the quarterback and hold him accountable. Right now, it is a shit show. They've got a diva wide receiver. They got former players coming out. You got players within that locker room that are not seeing eye to eye with Jalen Hurts. You've got a head coach that doesn't want to hold anyone accountable. You have an owner that's always going to back the quarterback. And then finally, they put pressure on him, meaning Nick Sirianni, to get rid of the guy he brought in, Kevin Patullo. Why did it take him so long? Why didn't he do it in midseason? Right now, they're being run like a shit show. Yeah, and there's a reason that they're not attracting the right candidates. No one's questioning the talent on the roster. Okay? No one's questioning the talent on the roster. I don't want to hear when you say go somewhere where there's low pressure, well, does that also speak to Jeffrey Lurie wanting a short lease with some of these guys? Or does it also factor in that if you bring in a alpha male as a coordinator, you don't want your head coach looking over his shoulder? And I believe that also has to be part of the equation. I really do. I really believe that. In my heart of hearts, I believe some of these offensive coordinators are thinking to themselves, I don't want to work under Nick Sirianni. This guy's a freaking clown. Now, Matt Nagy might turn around and decide, hey, this is a good spot for me, right? And who better can tell me about Philadelphia than Andy Reid? So maybe it's a guy like Matt Nagy. But all I'm saying, and I started the show with this, I don't believe that this, the glorifying of the Philadelphia Eagles and this offense, and hey, man, who wouldn't love to come in here and be an offensive coordinator? I think it's a little overblown. That's all. I think it's a little overblown. I don't see McDermott wanting to take an offensive coordinator position. I just don't. I think when you get fired like that and you get pushed out after 9 seasons, you want to get right back into it. You want to get right back into it. Brian Daboll could have been a fit. Ties with Jalen Hurts, Alabama. But it appears if he doesn't get the Bills coaching gig, he wants to go to Tennessee. Look, we don't really know the dynamic, but all we can go by is what's reported, and all I can go by is what I'm told. And there was friction. There was friction this season within that locker room. There was a little dissension, there was frustration, and I also believe that the fact that the owner, the GM, and the head coach really don't hold the quarterback accountable rubs players the wrong way. I'm not a Nick Sirianni fan. I've made it known. I've gone on the record saying it. I'm not a Nick Sirianni fan. Now, you can also sit there and say the glass half full, which some of these beat reporters that are obviously on the Eagles payroll will do and say, and I know some of these guys, I've known them for years, they'll tell you, hey, man, look at the silver lining. Here we go. I'm not going to say Mike McDaniel was going to light the world on fire. And you also, again, we talked about the Fangio and the connection and all this other stuff. We already went through that, right? Because you're not going to bring him in and then maybe, risk losing Fangio. These guys, again, the pairing in Miami, right? So we know about all that. We know about all that, right? And that's one of the reasons McDaniel, he talked about the transition of getting rid of Fangio and how they left, how it just kind of blew apart. So you cross him off. And that's why he decides I'm going to go with the Chargers. I don't want to deal with the headache. Brian Daboll, same thing. You got to cross Minter off the list. Kubiak, Kingsbury, those were names we threw around. They're not high on these. So what happens is you're running out of options here, is all I'm saying. And the elephant in the room is you got to figure out what kind of offense are you going to run? And if I come in, do I have total control and autonomy on this offense? And I think that's also the rub. Some of those guys I mentioned, McDermott is an alpha guy. You're talking about a guy that led Buffalo to all these AFC East division titles, playoff wins, a lot of wins over the past decade. He just gets fired. He's not going to come in and want to be an OC. He's going to want to come in and be like a de facto head coach. If I'm an offensive coordinator, Nick, I'm running the show. And they're not going to give him full autonomy. They're not going to give him all that control. Because if you bring in a McDermott who's had success as a head coach, the first sign of trouble with Sirianni, the first sign of trouble with the Eagles coming out of the gate slow or Hurts struggling or the offense struggling a little bit or the defense struggling and they're 2-5, 3-4, 1-4 out of the gate, September, October. Then all of a sudden it gets a little more hotter under Nick Sirianni's fanny. And then the argument, we're going to talk about it on the show. They'll talk about it on the networks, on the radio, whatever. Here we go. You're going to get rid of Sirianni. You might as well just throw in Sean McDermott. Hey, here's a guy that won a lot in Buffalo. Get rid of Sirianni. Let's see what McDermott can do. Sometimes these coaches don't want the alpha male. They want a little more submissive when it comes to their coordinators. Yes, we know Lamar has a no trade clause. He's not going to a team like Vegas that is nowhere near winning. Why would he do that? You keep asking that question, but again, sometimes now he's going to lose his offensive coordinator. Okay, that's number one. And again, you have to just understand that sometimes push comes to shove. That's all I'm saying. That's reported. I didn't say the Raiders. I believe Baltimore would quietly shop him if they can get a king's ransom. And obviously, Lamar has a no trade clause. But as I said, and we've learned throughout history, players have waived that no trade clause. They have done it before in the past. Now, is Baltimore better off with Lamar Jackson? Of course. Of course. If Lamar Jackson didn't have a no trade clause, then this is a little more dicier, sexier conversation because the Raiders, you're getting a king's ransom. You're getting a king's ransom, right? You're getting a substantial amount in return for a two-time MVP. But the Raiders are sitting there deciding, what are we going to do with the number one overall pick? Now, I think it was pretty easy. We all decided or all believed that it was going to be Mendoza. But now you're sitting there, you got the equity, you got the chips, you can push them into the table. Now you can fiddle around a little bit and you can at least float the idea and have these conversations. You can do it. And is it possible they also believe that maybe Mendoza doesn't come in right away and he fixes or solves their quarterback problem? And if it's not Lamar, maybe it's another quarterback. Maybe it is. You just don't know. You just don't know. And listen, I'm a Lamar Jackson fan. You know, I need that offensive line to keep him upright. I need a guy to come in and reel him in at times. I also need this identity of this offense to be a run first team. But we saw what Todd Monken was able to do with Lamar Jackson, turn him into an MVP quarterback, right? I mean, he's got great God given athletic ability and talent. I'm a Jackson fan. But like we talked yesterday, think about it. You also have to have the right fit. Now, it's a sexy conversation. Does Lamar Jackson fit in a rebuild? Probably not. But I'm just going again by the reports and the rumors out there. Could he potentially be traded? Can he waive a no trade clause if he feels it's the best fit for him going forward? Perhaps. Harbaugh basically came out yesterday during the Giants presser. He was on the air in New York and said, hey, we had a great relationship. So you got to take it for face value. Anytime a quarterback gets moved, anytime a head coach gets fired, that's when you start to hear the rumblings come out. And you just got to take it on face value. Jackson's a great quarterback. But Lamar Jackson, just like Josh Allen, he's got to win in the playoffs. That's his knock. That's been the bugaboo, right? Look, the Eagles make the playoffs seemingly every year. This is true. They've been to 3 Super Bowls, 8 years, won 2 of them. Eagles are fine. Will always be in the mix. It's not about, but here's the thing. It's not about, again, being, out of the mix, right? So, it's, if you really think about it, yes, they've been successful. But it should alarm some Eagles fans that Nick Sirianni was so reluctant to get rid of Kevin Patullo. It's alarming that Nick Sirianni runs down the sideline and he wants to basically have a confrontation with an all-pro wide receiver. It's a little alarming that Nick Sirianni did not take control of the offense when the season was still in the balance. And then to fire this guy after a no-show against the 49ers is a bad look. In the mix is 100%. Who would not want to be in the mix? But there's something to be said if you keep peeling back the curtain. There's a reason some of these coordinators do not want to get involved with the Philadelphia Eagles. That's all. That's all I'm saying. And I think I gave you my reasoning when the show started. I think it has to do with Sirianni. I think it has to do with Jalen Hurts. And I think it has to do with the fact we don't know yet what we're going to do with A.J. Brown. Now, all that might come to a head, and they bring in their guy and they trade A.J. Brown. Then we can debate if it's going to be an offense that's better with A.J. Brown or with not A.J. Brown. But the fact remains is that last year, they had a great run. They earned it. They deserved it. They ripped through the NFC. Saquon ran for 2,000 yards. The offensive line was a juggernaut. Everyone was happy, and Hurts played lights out in the playoffs. This season, different story. They flipped the script. It was a 180. The offense never got in gear. Now, can you fix that right away? I mean, do you guys honestly believe if you just throw in any coordinator, you're going to fix it? Sometimes players do have to make plays. The last time I checked, this team won 11 games, but they didn't play like a defending Super Bowl champ. There was no point in the season where I ever felt the Eagles were about to go on a run and defend the crown. I never felt it. Never, ever, ever felt it. I don't care that they jumped out of the gate 4-0. I don't care. They won 4 straight to open up. I don't care. They had a bad loss against Denver, bad loss against the Giants, right? Then they went on a mini run. They blew the lead against the Cowboys. They blew the lead against the Bears. They had a bad loss against the Chargers. I never felt this team was equipped to go on a run. I felt if they had a matchup against the Rams or Seattle in the playoffs, they would have got their doors blown off. But no one's denying their weapons. You just need to bring in a coordinator that doesn't want total control because they're not going to give it to him. And if you don't get it right now, and I'm not going to buy into the narrative Jalen Hurts with all these different offensive coordinators in his career, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But remember, they allowed Sirianni to handpick his guy, and they didn't even go outside the building. And it blew up in their face. That, again, you can't deny. And the longer you wait, the longer your options get limited. That's all. That's all. Man, I don't know what to tell you. We fired off at 3, brother. You got to get Johnny on the spot, right? To be honest, Jackson is good enough to be the rebuild. Yeah, but kind of like you guys pointed out, and I know Sal's going nuts and my Ravens guy's going nuts as well, thinking I'm kind of kiboshing this. It's not about being part of, good enough to be part of the rebuild. If there's a no trade clause involved and he gets moved, and you got to deal with it. But you also have to look at this point of his career, right? Like you just lose your head coach. You're going to lose your offensive coordinator. Derrick Henry eventually is going to retire. Lamar Jackson takes a lot of hits. Like you do have to keep building that offense around him and cater to his strengths. Are you going to stick him with a team like Cleveland, with a team like the Jets, with a team like the Cleveland Browns or the Raiders that are going to struggle? Is that going to make his game regress? Like you do need weapons around him. Sure, Raiders got a young running back. They got a stud tight end. We know that, right? But just my point is, obviously the hiccup is the no trade clause, right? But we've seen players, when pushed to some extent, they've lifted it. Okay, fine. I'm going to move. It happens. But it's all hearsay right now. It's all hearsay. But nobody thought Tomlin was going to get, quote, pushed out. Nobody thought Harbaugh was going to get fired. Nobody thought McDermott was going to get fired. Like, this is the NFL. This is the NFL. Coaches, quarterbacks, all have shelf life. Waiting for Nick to pick another butt of his. It's pathetic. Yeah, that's kind of my point. Like maybe there is a reason some of these guys are steering clear because they understand not even the nepotism, just the goofiness within that organization. Look, no one can sit there and tell me it's a bad organization, but right now at this moment, it is a shit show. They were the toast of the NFL last year, right? And they got fat and cocky and a little arrogant in the offseason. And then they got humble throughout the season. They lost a game they had no business losing to a team that was decimated with injuries in the 49ers. The quarterback didn't play well. The wide receiver was acting like a dog. The defense gave up, a couple trick plays, some big plays. And Shanahan was playing chess and Sirianni was playing checkers or tiddlywinks. Like you guys got to, again, take a step back and really understand that a lot of times, more times than not, when you have runs and scenarios like this, the head coach eventually is going to get exposed. And you took away his coordinators and look where you're at. You can ill afford to have Nick Sirianni really be the guy that's leading this search party. You can't. You're going to be lost. You're going to be going around in circles. I can't trust him. I can't. Kind of like what the last commenter said. They didn't even go outside to build. My guy, Kevin Patullo. And what happens is when you are so loyal like that, it's going to cost you your job. It is. It is. It's going to cost you your job. And I'm telling you, the worst scenario for the Philadelphia Eagles is to hire Sean McDermott as offensive coordinator. That's the worst thing they can do. You might get instant gratification, but eventually when the shit hits the fan, Sirianni is going to start acting like a guy that's on the defense, knowing that, man, if I can't get it done, if I can't right the ship, here we go. And listen, let's, again, full transparency. McDermott got fired by a clown, right? This guy worked hard. He was talented. I thought he was on the hot seat. I thought the message, it kind of played out in Buffalo and you ran its course. And it didn't help that you had a wide open opportunity. A wide open opportunity. No Kansas City, no Baltimore, no Cincinnati. It was all lined up. And the fault also lies on the arm and the feet of the franchise quarterback, Josh Allen. But you're talking about working for a boss that's a clown. So it's like, you know what? Thank God I'm out of here. But the Eagles turn around and hire McDermott. He wants full control of the offense, and I see him with Nick Sirianni. And then Sirianni's going to get exposed for who he really is. And it's just, a de facto cheerleader. That's all that is. I understand the shit show comment, but do you still fear them next year with the talent they have? Look, they have talent, but they're getting older. Saquon's getting older. You don't know what they're going to do with A.J. Brown. You got to pay defensive players. That's another thing we talked about, right? That's a talented team. Should they win their 10 games? Of course. Do I trust them in the playoffs if they show me the same type of offense this year, next year? I don't. I just don't. This is why you have to be thankful sometimes when you have a run and you get the Super Bowl. You really have to thank your lucky stars, man. It's hard to win in the National Football League. It really is. And I give them credit because they lost in heartbreaking fashion the first time around to Kansas City. And they positioned themselves to get back to the playoffs, which is hard to do. But we saw they were trending down 10-1, and then they dropped 6 straight and they got blown out on the road against Tampa. So you come back last year and everything hits. Saquon, the line, AJ's disgruntled, but then happy, gets his reps. Sirianni's barking, he's chirping, he's doing all the things that annoy the hell out of you, but they're winning. And you're ripped right through the playoffs. Your toughest game was against the Rams in the snow. You blew out Kansas City. You ended the Chiefs dynasty. All the credit in the world. No one can take that away from you. But I felt coming into this season, especially early on, something was off with the offense. And it's clear as day. We saw it. We saw it. And now, how does the offense look if you trade A.J. Brown? Even though there's drama, even though there's, this goofy dynamic with him and Jalen Hurts, you're still talking about an all-pro, all-world wide receiver. Look, does he play like a dog sometimes? Yeah. Does he get lazy on routes? Sure. I had to explain to some of you guys that I thought played football your entire life why it's critical for every wide receiver to run the proper route, because the whole offensive scheme, the whole play has to be in sync. If I'm not doing my job, you're not going to be able to do yours. But it's not like A.J. Brown. How he can replace A.J., sure, because we've seen him do it. But it might take a little bit of time. It might take, the offense to get in gear 6, 7, 8 games. I mean, can you afford that? Can you afford to get rid of a 28-year-old wide receiver that every season is putting up 1,000 yards, 7, 8, 9, 10 touchdowns, 80-something receptions within your offense? Is he that much of a headache? Or do they want to placate the quarterback that much that they're going to get rid of the diva wide receiver? And if you lose him, what does that do to the offense? It's hard to win in the National Football League. It is. That's why I go back when we talked about the rebuild, we talk about tanking in the NFL. I will take this. I'll scream at the top of the mountain. I'll take it to my grave. Coaches don't tank. They don't want to lose football games because they understand they are tagged with the wins and the losses. They don't want that on their resume. They are trying to win football games, period. It's not even up for debate. You can talk about an organizational structure. You can talk about teams like the Raiders or Cleveland turning around and maybe wanting to sit a player, stick them on the shelf, on the IR, the injury designation, or going with a young quarterback. There's ways to do it without doing it, but a head coach in the NFL does not want to tank. The last thing a head coach wants to do, especially an interim head coach, a guy like Mike Kafka, I don't want to lose games. I want to show that I can win games because I'm putting it on film, just like the players are putting it on film. Did he go for it on fourth down? Did he flip the field? Did he burn a timeout? Did he use the challenge appropriately? Are these guys playing hard for him? Is he going for broke? Is he taking a shot? You got 4, 5, 6 games to figure it out. They don't want to go 1-5. They don't care about a draft pick because they know in 6 weeks I might be out of a job. This is my audition. My audition. So to Scott's point, yes, it is so hard to win in the NFL. When you have an opportunity to win a friggin' football game, you take it. And oh, by the way, this whole you scored too fast is just ludicrous. You get in the end zone. You know, it's hard to get end zones. It's hard to get touchdowns in the NFL too. So yes, it's very hard to get to a Super Bowl. It's harder to win it. It's very hard to get back. That's what made what the Steelers did in the 70s, right? What the Cowboys did and the 49ers in the 80s, the Cowboys in the 90s, the Patriots for all those years. Falcons are expected to hire Broncos OC Tommy Rees as new offensive coordinator. So Stefanski's bringing over his former OC in Cleveland. So there you go. But it's so hard, right? It's just so hard to win. It really is. Bill 6 chimes in. Q, I'm not going to sit there and say my franchise is a mess, but I think you're the only one that actually intelligently debated the merits of Josh Allen. It was refreshing. It's not even debating. He's trending towards a Hall of Fame quarterback. But we just can't ignore Josh Allen has come up small in the playoffs. We can't ignore that Josh Allen did not play particularly well against the Denver Broncos. We can't gloss over that. And like I said the other day, if that is a Jared Goff, a Lamar Jackson, a Justin Herbert, or Trevor Lawrence, a Jalen Hurts, a Prescott, we're hammering them. We're hammering these guys today. It's hard to win in the NFL. It really is. It's so hard to win that even the Seahawks, who are likely to favorite, could be beat at home by the Rams, and that would be a big upset. Broncos can find their Nick Foles with Stidham and run it. Listen, I don't think if the Rams beat Seattle, I would not deem that a monumental upset. Denver, with a kid that's in essence coming off the sofa against New England, winning an AFC championship, yeah, that's a story for story. Again, I caution people to start to bring the parallels of the Jeff Hostetler's and the Nick Foles of the world. Hostetler came in for Sims when Sims broke his ankle on a nasty, rainy Saturday afternoon against Buffalo. I believe it was week 12 or 13. It's not like it happened in the playoffs. It didn't happen. I remember it like it was yesterday. I thought the season was done. I thought the season was absolutely over. It was a nasty Saturday game, December 15th. The weather was horrible. Horrible. They're 11-2. They just had a big win against Minnesota, and Sims breaks his ankle. And then Hostetler comes in for the final 2 weeks, and then obviously the playoffs. You know, Nick Foles, same scenario. Same exact scenario. Go back and you look at that run that Philadelphia Eagles team had in 2017. Carson Wentz was playing like an MVP. And then what happens? He gets hurt on the road against the Rams. But that was also what? Week, I don't know, 13? Right? It was week 13. So Foles had a lot of reps and a lot of weeks to get ready for the playoffs. And I remember, again, at the time, I had on Hostetler. I was doing the show down here with the ESPN affiliate. That season, we did a weekly spot with Nigel Bradham. And I asked him pinpoint right after that game, you know, what's the rallying cry right now? What's your belief in Nick Foles? And he basically told us, he told the listening audience at the time, all the confidence in the world in Nick Foles. He's, in essence, a pro's pro. We'll be fine. And what happened? They turn around. They win 2 out of 3. Had nothing to play for that last game against the Dallas Cowboys. Foles comes. They make a defensive play late against Atlanta. They fall behind 7-0. Remember, they fell behind 7-0 early against Minnesota, and they rip off 38 points. And then obviously he outperforms Brady. But he had 5 weeks. Hostetler had 3-4 weeks. Stidham's coming right off the bench, right off the sofa. That's a tough spot for the kid. So to Scott's point, yeah, you know what you got to do? You got to run the football. You got to run the football. You got to run it, and you got to rely on that defense. Denver winning is a monumental upset. A monumental. It would be one of the biggest upsets we've seen in probably the last 10, 15 years. Don't let the line confuse you. Seriously, don't go by 6.5. And by the way, the Rams on the road are only a 2.5-point dog. They've got a puncher's chance in that game. They really do. We'll break down the games a lot more on Friday. Still have 6. We saw 6 open jobs. Do we think they're all filled before Super Bowl? Man, that's a great question. Well, you got to remember too, some of these guys that they want to interview, they're still dealing with conference championships, right? Buffalo is an intriguing landing spot. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Wouldn't it be something if McCarthy went back? I shouldn't say back, but he goes to Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers. Like quietly, no one's mentioned Mike McCarthy. I don't see Buffalo hiring him. Mike McCarthy in Baltimore. I don't know about that. You got 6 remaining. So if you think about it, if you're going by quarterback, which is the most desirable? Now, we can argue whether it's Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. Both those teams, both those franchises have arguably the best player in the league in the most important position, right? So then right now, that's a coveted job. You fire Sean McDermott. You have a bad loss against Denver. You are telling Josh Allen, hey, our window is still open. I don't believe it is, but this is what you got to sell him on. Our window is still open. So yeah, you go to Buffalo, and here we go, right? Baltimore, you got an MVP quarterback and an all-world running back, a Hall of Fame running back. And the Ravens are the only team this coaching cycle that really has prospective candidates, right? Think about it. Where you can kind of open up the door to a 2-time NFL MVP. Plus, you got Derrick Henry, who, unlike Saquon, showed no signs of slowing down, and he's 31. You got building blocks. You got a very good linebacker in Smith. You got a very good safety in Hamilton. Baltimore will make the playoffs. I don't believe you can. I don't care who the head coach is. Baltimore next year will make the playoffs. Now, they've got some cap space to play with, right around 13, an effective cap space, according to my guys over at overthecap.com. They'll probably move on from one of their tackles. And I can't even pronounce his name because I butchered the kid that had the neck injury. So those are your top 2. Now, you got the Raiders, you have the Steelers, you have the Browns, and then you have the Cardinals last. I would say out of all those, I would actually stick Arizona last, and I'm going to tell you why. If you look at what Arizona did this season, 14 of their final 15 games, 13 of their final 14 games, they showed absolutely no pulse. They've got uncertainty at the quarterback situation. Kyle Murray's not going to be the long-term answer. That contract is an albatross. They have no path to victory, viable path to fix that situation in the offseason. They don't. And I think they'll run it back with Brissett. I think Arizona's going to try to move Murray to the Jets, because if the Jets decide to move on from Dante Moore, which again, think about it, he's not, he's not even available, but the Jets, if he was, and he's not, because we know he's going back to school, but if the Jets decided we don't want a quarterback coming out at number 2, then they're going to make a move for Kyler Murray. And they got like $20 million, Arizona does, to play with in cap, and the Jets, as we know, have a lot of equity, a lot of draft picks. And they got good players, Arizona on offense. They do. they have some good players and they have good players on defense, but they were just lifeless. So I would put Buffalo, Baltimore 1-2, 1A, 1B. I would put Arizona bottom of the list. And unfortunately, I would actually put the Raiders ahead of the Browns. Now, you can build around that Browns defense, right? You can build around their defense, and they drafted, they got some young players. You still don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback. That's the elephant in the room. So if I'm interviewing for the Browns head coaching job, my first question is, what are we doing at the quarterbacking spot? Is it an open competition? Are we going to try to, insert Watson? Guaranteed contract coming off injuries. We're going to try to get a return on the investment. Do we believe it's Gabriel? Did we see enough from Shedeur Sanders? That is a cluster. And I don't want to be involved in that. I don't. I really don't. When the offseason officially begins, and again, I just pulled up over the cap, Cleveland has more than 12 million. 12 million to play with. But the albatross of the Watson contract is just, you just can't gloss over it because it's on the books for 2026 and 2027. And the other problem is, I don't believe the ownership GM head coach dynamic there is healthy. I don't. I really don't. Scott knows this. Mike in Ohio knows this. They're diehard Browns fans. The Haslam family, they have run this organization. It's pretty much in the ground. It's one of the most unstable organizations in the league. And Andrew Berry, I don't know for the life of me why everyone's sitting there saying if he got fired, he'd find a job in a heartbeat. He hasn't had the best track record when it comes to drafting. So you have that combination, plus the Deshaun Watson contract, that might scare off a recycled head coach. Maybe a young coach decides, hey, at least they're going to give me a little wiggle room. I don't have to turn it around in a year or two. Give me 3-4 years. But maybe a guy like McDermott's like, man, I'm going to get burned out from this crap after a year or two. I don't want to deal with that headache. And that leaves the Steelers and then the Raiders. And the Steelers, we know one thing about Pittsburgh, right? The model of consistency. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. Okay, now you're replacing the guy who was the man. That's a tough ask. They have a lot of cap, right? They've got a lot of cap space. They got like 25, 26 million. But again, what are you doing at the quarterback position? What are you doing at the quarterback position? Like Cleveland, like the Jets, like the Giants prior to Dart, they haven't really had an established quarterback aside from the ones that, we know of, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning. So Pittsburgh's got to decide, what are we going to do at the quarterback position? What's our offense? Now, are you running it back with Aaron Rodgers? He's going to be 43. Are you maybe pulling the trigger for Daniel Jones coming off a torn Achilles? Malik Willis? I think the Falcons are going to run it back with Kirk Cousins, which God knows what's going to happen with Michael Penix. Kyler Murray? It's tough, man. At least with the Raiders having the number 1 overall draft pick, and you have Brock Bowers, and you have Gentry, and you have the number 1 draft pick, and you have $1 million in cap space. The Raiders, to me, that's appealing. I know you look at it on face value and say, look at the way the franchise is run. They don't win a lot of games. But follow me for a second. Forget about the players I mentioned. $100 million in cap room. $100 million. And I think what they're going to do is, and it's not going to be quietly, I think they will listen to offers for Max Crosby. I believe that. So he might not be in their long-term plans. And the fact that he's posting videos when they shelved him and he's, at home in the basketball court, that didn't sit well with the NFL, and it didn't sit well with the Raiders. And now, how much power, how much say is Tom Brady going to have? Listen, there's a long way before this team is a 10-11 win team. But I'll say this. They can win some football games. I think they can take the jump of 3, 4, 6, 7, year number 2, 8, 9, year number 3. Hey, they're on the fringe. They're on the outside looking in. They're competing with an older Kansas City team. They're competing with, an older Charger team, right? They're competing with maybe a, keep coming up Denver team. So I go Baltimore, Buffalo. I go the Raiders number 3. I go the Steelers number 4, the Browns number 5, and the Cardinals number 6. And the Steelers, Browns, and Cardinals is because we have no idea what the hell they're going to do at the quarterback position. If that kind of long-winded, right? I said it wouldn't be a huge upset. That's why it's so hard to win. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, and you are correct. Yeah, you are correct. Yeah. Denver, that's an upset. But the Rams, yeah, that's going to be a great game, the Rams in Seattle. Got to imagine some of the coaches from potential Super Bowl teams would be hot candidates, but if you hire before it's over, you take yourself out of contention. Yeah, we always talk about, like, for instance, the coordinator with Seattle, the offensive coordinator. He is a hot name. Now, if Seattle blows out the Rams and they win a Super Bowl and slinging Sammy Darnold's the MVP, then guess what? He's going to get a lot of opportunities to interview. But to your point, how fast do these teams want to operate? Because now January and the February and the draft is in April, right? I know people don't believe this, but I think Cleveland and Baltimore are the best available options. Cleveland has tons of draft capital, top 10 D. Baltimore has an MVP quarterback, running back, and a good defense. Baltimore's defense stunk. Baltimore's defense was not. They had players, but they were bad at times this year. They were bad. They couldn't stop the run at times. They're good. They're good. Yes, Lamar Jackson. Yes, Derrick Henry. Yes, tight end, Flowers. Yeah, 100%. The problem with Cleveland, to your point, it's above. It's above. It's the owners. It's that family, and it's the GM. Like, you better know what you're walking into. And listen, the same thing can be said with the Raiders, but the difference is the cap, the draft, top number 1 pick, and I just mentioned some of the players as well. Arizona to me, Pittsburgh. So if you want to debate Cleveland or Raiders, that's fine. Joey B, where does Josh Allen land if he's really serious about getting out of Buffalo, Miami, Vegas, Arizona? I think it's frustration. It's raw emotion from Josh Allen. That's all that is. It's raw emotion. It's a cluster what's going on in Buffalo right now. It is. I don't see Josh. I can see Joe Burrow forcing his hand out of Cincinnati before Josh Allen decides I'm done with Buffalo. It's just raw right now. Because Josh Allen has to understand he came up small. He's got elite talent. But you're talking about a quarterback. I need a guy to play and thrive in high pressure playoff situations. And I haven't been able to get over the hump against Kansas City. That's a fact. Kind of like Lamar. I'm doing well in the regular season. I'm winning awards. I'm putting up stats. But come playoff time, I don't get it done. And, for the Bills Mafia chiming in, no, Josh Allen crying did not directly get Sean McDermott fired. Because the owner basically is coming out because it's fresh, it's raw, but you had 24, 48, 72 hours to deal with it then. Now you're coming out and you're basically saying, well, yeah, the tears, it's upsetting, another playoff loss. Yeah, we had to make the decision. I think it's a crock. I really do. I think it's a crock. But again, it's a good landing spot because they do have weapons. It's a great football town. You're in the AFC East, so you're really just dealing with New England. The Jets are bad. Miami's bad. You can be competitive. Now, you're still dealing with the AFC as a whole, but still, you got Josh Allen. To me, Josh Allen's not going to – when you start to hear Josh Allen start to talk about the game's not fun, taking a lot of hits, it's frustrating, then you can start – have the conversation, okay, what's going on? Joe Burrow is basically telling Cincinnati, get a friggin' defense for me. That's what he's telling them. I'm tired of the shit. I'm tired of having to score 35 points. I don't want to keep coming back from 17 down. Build a defense around me and let's try to win this thing. If Buffalo or Baltimore trade their quarterback, the GM needs to be fired, like Nico with the Mavs. Can't trade away generational talent for any reason. Yeah, well, I'll say this, though. Everyone thought that, and now I'm not comparing the two. I'm not. And I don't see Buffalo moving on from Josh Allen. I don't. But I will say we have seen all pro MVP caliber quarterbacks eventually get moved. But there would be a revolt. There would, to your point, there would be a revolt if they did that. And whoever landed them is going to get a hell of a quarterback in their prime. I'm not saying Tom Brady isn't taking any ownership responsibility seriously, but his name alone, if it was a quarterback or coach, I would assume this guy is a winner and I would want to be there. Well, yes, I mentioned this last week when we were talking about the Raiders, that I believe when you have a guy like Tom Brady and you're a quarterback, why wouldn't you want to be there? Right? Imagine picking the brain of Tom Brady. I mean, to me, that's invaluable. That's ridiculous, priceless information, man. Um, but you also have to. There's a flip side of that. Tom Brady, the reality is, I draft a quarterback or I bring in a quarterback I really like. The pressure of knowing TB12 is watching every throw. Maybe some guys can't handle that. Maybe some guys can't handle that. Because no one's living up to that legacy. No one's living up to that career, that resume and body of work. Um, but Brady's definitely going to have a say. Absolutely. They got cap, they got draft capital, they got players. They're going to get better. It's not going to be next year, but they're going to get better. Like I said, a lot of times, man, when you get some of these players that had successful careers, it's and you stick them in the front office, sometimes it can be a detriment because they played. They know what it takes to be a champion. And once they sniff out a player that's not performing, or they sniff out a player that's not performing to the level of his contract, it becomes very frustrating because you can't control it. You're not going to suit up and go out there. You have to have faith and confidence in the roster you assembled, along with the GM and the head coach, that this is a winning organization. You're putting out a winning product. And sometimes these guys, this is why the NFL is so different from baseball and from MLB, from the NBA, because it's such a short season that there's no margin of error, man. I always laugh when people sit there and say, you lost in September. Yeah, but that can actually set the tone for the rest of the season. You lost in an AFC game and you're an NFC guy and you lost in October, November. Yeah, but the offense struggled. They're getting film on us. Now we're trending in the wrong direction. Like, every game counts. Every game counts. It's a short season. You don't have wiggle room. You don't. Even with the extended playoffs, you just don't. Back in the day, Parcells would say the season of 16 games is split up in two parts. 8 and 8, right? My liberal arts math. 8 and 8. You go 5-3, you go 5-3, you win 10 games, you're in. It was simple math. It's changed since then. It really has. We get a fluky year where an 8-win team, a 9-win team, a team with a losing record gets in. We get a fluky year where a team wins 11 games and they don't get in. We get a fluky year where you win 14 and you got to go on the road. Like, as long as you're putting out the competitive product and you're consistently winning and you're trending in the right direction come January, more times than not, you'll be one of the last teams standing. But it's very hard to get there. And you start it off in the offseason, then the draft, then OTAs, then training camp, then preseason, then the regular season. That's the beauty of the NFL. You don't win Super Bowls in September and August, but you can lose them. Yeah, you can definitely lose them. Burrow for Allen, would you do it, Q? Well, I'll tell you, if I was saying Jalen Hurts to Cincinnati for Joe Burrow, and I know that Burrow and Allen are much better quarterbacks than Jalen Hurts, man, that's a little dangerous question there on a Woosah Wednesday. Man, Man, I like both quarterbacks. Burrow is a great quarterback. And you know what? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Status quo, leave as is. Now, if you were to say Allen or Burrow for my guy Jackson Dart, of course I'm doing it. Sorry, Jackson. Of course I'm doing it. Two great quarterbacks, mind you. Two great quarterbacks. But, if you kind of take it a deeper route with that, Vince, look at the AFC. Like, look how everything kind of broke. Are we going to see another season where there's no Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, or Joe Burrow? That's what made Josh Allen and the Bills losing, I think, that much more depressing for a Bills fan. Jacksonville is a young team. Houston is a young team. Denver is a young team. The Chargers are a young team. Like, you've got some of these veterans quarterbacks that are not getting any younger. Teams are starting to catch up. But no, I would not do that. Let me see. I was with you picking the brain, but that's a good point too. Comes with the pressure. Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing. Imagine like, you're with the Lakers and Magic Johnson, the head coach, and you're the starting point guard. I mean, there's pressure, right? Isn't there pressure there? Brady is a football savant. And these guys that their whole life centers around the sport. They live for it, like they breathe it, right? Brady breathes it. Peyton Manning loves what he does, but it's not on the level of a Tom Brady. Now, Peyton Manning, Hall of Fame, all-time great, genius at the line of scrimmage, the audibles, check down, boom, 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 Omaha, Omaha, Omaha. Loves what he's doing right now. Brady, you can tell, if you gave Tom Brady truth serum and Peyton Manning truth serum, and you stuck them both in a room and you said, hey, guys, I'll let you suit up one more time for Sunday. Peyton Manning's saying, nah. Tom Brady's like, where do I sign? That competitive nature, that competitive fire, now I have to try to live up to that. That's a tough ask, man. That is a tough ask. There's no way a quarterback's coming in and thinking to themselves, oh man, I can impress this guy. No. It takes a little more than 30 of 35, 388, a couple touchdowns, and a 6-game winning streak to impress a 7-time Super Bowl winner, a 5-time Super Bowl MVP, a 3-time league MVP. So there's going to be pressure, anyone that's under center, because the guy that's going to be watching you the most is going to be Brady when he's not calling the games for Fox. But you understand what I'm saying. Always an interesting dynamic when you start to add those all-time greats and you put them in those roles, right? John Elway, John Lynch, right? Matt Ryan's going to deal with it in Atlanta. Imagine what people would be saying about Dan Marino if he played today, or even Peyton Manning. Would we be trying to trade them and saying they aren't the guy? It makes me rethink my position on Trevor. Trevor Lawrence, yeah. I mean, imagine, social media when, especially if it was like really not if it's infancy, but in its prime, when a guy like Marino's slinging it, but yet, those Miami teams were having problems in the playoffs, or Denver, go back to the late 80s. Imagine having social media and John Elway dragging these teams and everyone ripping Elway because he can't get over the hump when you don't realize he's got no friggin' running game. It is. I think what goes deeper into your point, Vince, and I appreciate it greatly, what we have to learn, and I've learned this a long time ago, just from not only covering the sports, covering these games, dealing with athletes pretty much for 20-something odd years, there is no athlete that is untouchable. There isn't. As much as we want to believe it, there's no way they're ever going to move this guy, cut this guy, release this guy, bench this guy. It's a different era. It's a different game. And there's also no more loyalty. All I'm looking about is this. Hey, I'm paying you $250 million. I'm paying you $50 million a year over 5 years. You better get my ass to the Super Bowl. You better win an MVP. We better hoist a Lombardi trophy. Anything less, I'm not getting a return on my investment. Eagles are going to have that conversation if they struggle again with Jalen Hurts and his contract. It's going to happen. It is. No one believed they would move Carson Wentz. They moved Carson Wentz. Now, I'm not putting them in the same category. I'm not. But we've seen it before. Quarterbacks, they have a shelf life just like head coaches. Oh my God, Tom Brady. Is this it? Is Tom Brady done with the Patriots? Oh my, I can't believe this. Oh, he threw a pick to close out his career against the Titans. What happens? Did we ever think Tom Brady was going to be wearing a Bucs uniform? And then he lives a charmed life. First year, what happens? He turns around, he brings them to the Super Bowl. Oh, by the way, it's in Tampa and he wins it. Like those are rare, going out on top type of stories. And all these quarterbacks, they're going to be measured by, did they ever get to the Super Bowl? Did they ever win it? Sure. In 10 years, we can be talking about Burrow. We can talk about Lamar Jackson. We can talk about Josh Allen. These guys are right up there. When their careers are done, we're going to look at their body of work and we're going to have the debate. Are they a Hall of Fame quarterback? And we're going to debate and go through their credentials and their resume. And then it's going to be the Marino comment. Well, they never won a Super Bowl. Yeah, shouldn't take away from their career, but that's how you're measured. It's the only sport that you can do that. You're not sitting there watching the NHL and, oh man, that goalie never won the Stanley Cup. You're not watching the NBA and saying, that center never won a ring. You're not. You're not watching baseball and saying, that pitcher never won a World Series. We're not doing that. We collectively might sit there and say, well, Kershaw had his, issues in the playoffs and finally got over the hump, and had a wonderful career with the Dodgers. You can talk about it in that capacity, right? Not a big game pitcher. But when we talk about the NFL, it always comes back to what? Did they win a Super Bowl? Did they win a championship? Especially with the quarterbacks. It's always that conversation. There's no other position in all of sports where we are tagging wins and losses. Now, a pitcher, yeah, I get it, but it's not the same magnitude or same, I guess you'd say, bravado as an NFL quarterback. It's just not. It's a great point you bring up. It really is. It's a great point. All right, couple minutes to play with. We'll close it out on the other side. 5 o'clock straight up. All right, 5 o'clock straight up. A couple minutes to play with before we get out of here. I mentioned the Butler injury in the NBA. You got a little, not a light night, somewhat of light night. I'll tell you this though. I'd be very careful with my Knicks right now. There's going to be a revolt if the Knicks lose to the Nets. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You will hear calls from Mike Brown's head. Knicks are laying 12.5. Celtics laying 10.5 against the Pacers. But that Butler injury was brutal. Nick and Wildford chimes in. Excellent breakdown of the Hall of Fame queue. You're right. Beltran's a compiler, but Jones definitely is shoo-in. Yeah, I mean, but there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. Beltran was a great player. I mean, Met fans are going to remember he never took the bat off his shoulders, but he's look, ultimately Hall of Famer. But we start to question Hall of Very Good. Like if you have to ask if the guy's a Hall of Famer, that kind of tells you he's not a Hall of Famer. Now, would I have Beltran in? I would debate it. Andrew Jones, yes, because of his defensive prowess. And all you have to do is listen to John Smoltz's comments. All right, start wrapping it up on a Woosah Wednesday. Good stuff. We're powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee, Three Brooks Bourbon. Get ready with tea. And of course, Play It Again Sports, 2 locations. AUDACY app. Download it. Check out Coastal Sports Digital Network and SR 1029 FM The Game. Check out the YouTube channel for notifications for tomorrow. We got hoops well into the night. So again, keep the YouTube channel on notifications. We'll try to squeeze in a little power hour tomorrow. If not, back in the saddle heavy on Friday for a Football Friday edition. We will break down the AFC, NFC championship games. We'll give you our picks, some plays as well. And we'll kind of just run through the gamut as far as this NFL head coaching carousel and, of course, some of these vacancies. All right, good stuff as always. Appreciate you guys hanging for close to 2 hours as always. You guys are fantastic. Fired off a little early today. You guys are the best. As always, don't forget, get social with me at Rich Q on X, IG, TikTok, Rich Q on the mic. You guys have a wonderful Woosah Wednesday edition of On Q. Enjoy your Wednesday. And again, check the notifications mañana to see if we are back in the saddle. You guys have been awesome too with the commenting on the YouTube channel and the subscriptions. I cannot thank you enough. Share, comment, pass along to your buddies as well. Get them involved on the conversation. All right, so have a good Sports Thursday, or I should say a good Sports Wednesday. Back in the saddle, either mañana or on Friday. Check out the notifications. Be safe, be sound. As always, I'm Rich Quinones. This has been On Q. Hasta luego, mi dia.